Okay, I went from running a marathon in 3 hours and 25 minutes to 11 months later running a marathon in 2 hours and 37 minutes. That's a 48-minute improvement. Now, I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this because I genuinely believe most runners are capable of far more than they realize. Most runners set goals that feel safe. Most people set goals that feel safe because they don't want to fail in front of their peers. They don't want to fail in front of other people. But what if you stop worrying about other people's expectations and actually went all in? In this video, I'm going to break down exactly what I changed in my training, my mindset, and my approach that led to this massive breakthrough. I'm Lee Grantham, a coach and a professional ultra runner who went from not being able to run 400 meters to representing my country for the 100K and running 6 hours and 42 minutes. And I did that because I was more interested to find out what I was capable of, where my potential was, rather than hitting round numbers. And if you're the same and you want professional guidance in order to get there, then book a performance strategy call by clicking the link in the description. Now, first of all, I'll give you my background so you can see how closely this relates to you and what you can do in order to knock a massive amount of time off your marathon. In 2008, I was working in an office and there was a crash in the market and I took a sabbatical and went cycle touring in Asia. And all that really involved was getting up on a daily basis and waking up before the sun and cycling for as long as I possibly could that day. And I had to get into it first, but cycling to the next village that had some kind of hostel or place to sleep. And along that journey, I just figured out that what I was doing, this office work that I was doing in the city, it wasn't feeding my soul. And what did feed my soul as a kid growing up was anything and everything to do with sport. And I was okay at running. But just like the cycling, I loved running. I loved the idea of just pushing yourself and kind of input equals output. And it's more to do with work ethic and your discipline and dedication rather than your skill set and ability. So on a long leg that I was doing from Bangkok to Singapore, which is about 2,200 kilometers, I just made my mind up that once I get back to my base in Thailand, I'm gonna start running. And on January the 3rd, 2010, I went out for my first run. And I talk about this a lot because I went out for an hour run because I thought that was quite sensible. And based on the cycling that I'd been doing, I thought it was a reasonable target. And I came back 5 minutes later and I couldn't run for 400 meters. But based on everything I'd learned so far in my life, whether that was my recruitment career or whether that was my cycling, the harder you work, the better you become at it. And the more that you do it, the more that you learn how to do it right. And that's what I loved about running, and that's what I was going to put into practice. And literally from that January the 3rd run, not being able to run 400 meters, I'd already decided that I was going to be a professional runner. And so the mindset shift for me was the big thing. It's holding most people back. Most people play it safe because they don't want to fail. They care deeply about what other people think. And I'd gone through this period in my early 20s and late teens and probably boyhood where I cared what society thought of me. And therefore I wanted the things in my life, or to own the things that I thought society valued because I wanted to be seen as successful. And whether it was luck or I made this happen, but I moved away from Manchester. I moved away from my home age 23. And when I moved away, I realized that the world doesn't work like that. And most people around the world, especially away from big cities, they don't care what you're driving, what you're wearing, what shoes you're wearing, what watch you have. But more importantly than that, you shouldn't care, because most people, and a lot of people will say, I really don't give a shit what people think. When in actual fact, I'd say 95% of people, probably higher, not just care what other people think, they let what other people think govern their life, and it affects every single decision they take. And I would find this out later, but it's why runners aim for round numbers and why a lot of runners are aiming to do that 2-hour 59 marathon or that 3-hour 29 marathon, because they want to dip under and they want to be seen by whoever is going to know about that result to be successful and have executed that training plan. And in most cases, it is the single thing that is holding them back from running much faster. So I was very extreme and I stopped playing it safe, and I was nowhere near safe, and I was doing too much. From that very first week, of training, I was training like a professional athlete because I just thought to myself, if I train like a professional athlete, a professional runner, how far can I take this? And I would make all the mistakes you could possibly think of. I was trying to put stuff together from what I had found on the internet. I set the bar insanely high and I would fail miserably, but I became a student of the sport and a self-experiment. And I ran a marathon, but then my first real marathon, exactly 14 years ago today, at the Barcelona Marathon, which is today, I went out there following an online plan, and really I was picking a time based on hope rather than what I felt I was capable of based on the training. And so I just thought 3 hours. 3 hours is a good time, and that's what I think I'm capable of. And so I was still making those mistakes of, okay, it's kind of guesswork. And I was the guy at the expo who was buying brand new shoes. I was buying gels for the first time. I was making those silly mistakes. I went out at goal pace. It felt very comfortable until halfway, and then I blew up. And it was a miserable second half. But it taught me a lesson of you need to know what you're capable of when you get on that start line and then execute what you're capable of, not what you're hoping to do. And when you fail at something, then the people close to you will think, okay, so you've tried that, you're not very good at it, are you gonna go on to something else? And I guess you can quit at that point. For me, it was like, what am I doing wrong? And what do I need to do right in order to really move forward? So from March 2011 to February 2012, this is what I did. Number one, I read every book on running that you could possibly imagine. Anything I could get my hands on, whether it was an article, whether it was a publication, based on a scientific study, I read it all. I became obsessed with what the best in the world were doing and what the best coaches in the world were teaching. Number two, I figured out that if I want to do this to the best of my ability, I have to do it full time. And if I want to do it full time, then somebody needs to pay me to do it, or I need to pay myself to do it. And I figured out that to do that, in order to do it, my niche within running would need to be ultra running. It would need to be going far, and that's where I could still be competitive. And so all of a sudden, I was living the life of a professional athlete. The marathon became something that I know I needed to become good at, and I needed to get towards running a 2:20 marathon because that's what the best ultra runners in the world were running. I didn't need to be super fast. I didn't need to be the fastest white guy in the world, run 2:08, 2:09. I just needed to be solid in the marathon and run a 2:20 hour. Number three, if I wanted to run a 2:20 marathon, I needed to be much faster in the 5K and 10K. Mostly the 10K, but in order to be a good 10K runner, I needed to be a good 5K runner. And of course, what that does for your marathon is if you can be faster, much faster at your top end speed or at your 5K speed and then 10K speed, it's gonna make the marathon feel a lot more comfortable for longer in the race. And in turn, my primary goal of getting good in ultra marathons, that is gonna be affected too for the good. Number four, I fixed my long runs. All of a sudden, they'd gone from running long, slow distance all of the time to running specific long runs and building specific race pace within the long run and playing around with that. They weren't perfect runs, but it was a massive improvement than just going slow all of the time. And what I then found was that was crossing over nicely into the rest of the running, into the easier runs, into the interval session as well. I'd have that strength. And so those interval sessions would get quicker. Point number five. And without this point, none of the other things could have happened, and definitely not that progress in 11 months. And for me, it has always been a strong point. Even as in my career as a recruiter, I was pretty weird on this topic. And I used to view recruitment and any job really as a sport. And because I came from playing football when I was a kid, I used to look at the world like it was competition, it was team play, it was learning to fail, it was delayed gratification, it was, being bad at something for years and then it finally clicking. But when it came to recruitment, which I viewed in exactly the same way, highly competitive environment, I realized that to be good at that, and certainly to be the best in my office, I needed to optimize my body. So whereas everybody else was going out and getting hammered, like midweek and at the weekends, for me, I was treating it like a sport. So I would get to the office first in the morning, and the way that I was first to get to the office in the morning is I moved to the apartment building right next to my office. And so my commute was 30 seconds. And so all of a sudden, I could be the first person in the office. And what I figured out was, if I can be the first person in the office, then that sets the tone for who I am as a person. But also I'm able to get a couple of hours work done in the morning without distraction. And then I can leave at 5:30 and go to the gym. And then I can come back after the gym at 6:30 and continue working and then go home and sleep. And so even in my professional life, I was treating my body like a professional athlete. I was eating really well and I was guarding my sleep. And this is the point, sleep. I was guarding my sleep with my life. And without that good sleep, you're missing a key foundation, along with reduced stress, which you have much more than you probably think in a career, especially like something like recruitment. But if you can optimize those points and get diet right, all of a sudden you've got the 3 pillars working in your favor, and then you can stack that physical performance on top and physiological performance. And the best way to think about it is you don't get fast from training. You get fast from recovering from great training. And to recover from great training, you need your sleep. Point number 6. I was running a lot of my runs too quick. I wanted to feel like I'd done that workout. I talk about this a lot, and most runners want to feel like they've done something when they get back from their run. And that puts them often in the gray zone or even above into zone 3 and 4, when in actual fact, they should be at a conversational pace most of the time. So all of a sudden, I had that structure, and don't get me wrong, I wasn't perfect. I was still doing too much. I was running hard too often, but it was way less than before. And I was making sure that those easy days were easy enough so that I could really hit it when it came to those key sessions. Number 7, I went all in. And this is the reason for the channel, all in. It's the reason for the brand, all in. I moved to Spain and I went to a place very close to a race that I'd raced. And I thought, if I want to become a good runner, that is the best place to do. Mountains, altitude, great trails, every direction I was running was just beautiful to be in all year round. I was training like that professional athlete that I dreamed about a year and a half before. I was already training like that, and I was already giving all my attention and focus. I was completely obsessed with running. I still had a full-time job, but this was where my heart was completely. And then came the race, exactly 11 months later, February the 19th. And I remember it so clearly. And I had a strategy, I had a plan in place to execute. And it was pretty chaotic at the start line. And I just remember thinking, I say this a lot, but just remember thinking, you've got to be calm, because these initial kilometers, these initial miles, they don't really mean anything to the final result. You're gonna make way more up in that second half, and in that final 2/3 than you're gonna lose in the first couple of kilometers or the first mile. And at this point, all the logic was pointing at me going and correcting the year before at Barcelona, going running 25, 26 minutes faster and getting that 2 hour 59, getting that sub 3, checking that box, and then moving on from there. But I just wasn't interested in doing that and kind of ticking off a round figure. For what purpose? I was more interested in trying to get as much as I possibly could out of my body. And I was also willing to fail. And I think it's such a big point. Like, most runners race so infrequently that they can't really afford to fail. And again, they've got that point where they care what other people think. For me, it was just one race in a process of me running for my country. And it's nuts to say that, because if you're, at the time I'd ran 75 minutes for the half marathon, if you're running 75 minutes for a half marathon, you shouldn't be thinking about running for your country. And you certainly shouldn't, or I certainly shouldn't have been thinking about running for my country if I'd run a 3 hour and 25-minute marathon. But in that first half of the marathon, in that first half of Seville Marathon, I went out in 1 hour 19. So it's pretty close to my half marathon personal best at that point, but I knew I could hold it. And in the second half, I ended up running a minute quicker and coming in at 2 hours and 37. So going 48 minutes quicker in just 11 months. And it wasn't easy. There was a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the beginning, it's easy. You should feel like you're on the handbrake. And then there's a focus part in the middle, and then you really need to dig in. It was exactly like that. And when I crossed the finish line, and I'd ran 48 minutes quicker, 2:37, I'd run 2:40, I was overjoyed for about 2 minutes. And then I realized two things, or I started to think about two things. Firstly, I could have run faster in the first half. And secondly, what do I need to do from now to go faster? And that was already my thought process within 2-3 minutes of crossing the line. And the first point about going faster in the first half, and I was talking about this with somebody just yesterday who's running New York City half marathon today, and this is his first race. We haven't been working together, but we may work together, and because he has no previous experience of racing, then everything is going to be new for him. And so pacing is an issue because the app or the online training plan that he's been following has not really indicated what he's capable of in this race. And so it's unfamiliar territory for him. And so he's got two options really. He can go out too fast and then blow up and then feel what it feels like in that last quarter or that last half to be, excruciating like I was at Barcelona. Or he can go out too slow and get to the end and feel like he could have gone a bit faster in the beginning. And having done both of those ways at Barcelona and Sevilla, you're going to get more information from the second method of going out too slow and getting as much sample data as you possibly can from how you felt, what you did right, what you did wrong, what you can improve on, all these things, than the lesson, which is still important, of what it feels like when things don't go to plan. Because that's essentially what marathon running is. It is, how do you problem solve on the go? Because you're going to run into problems in the marathon. And it might be as small as, I missed a drink because I didn't see it until last minute, I wasn't really thinking, but that's another learning point, another way that you move forward. And for me, that was just another point along my running journey that was a reaffirmation of you're doing what you should be doing. And when you commit and go all in, you're gonna get the rewards eventually. You may fail loads because your expectations are high, but you're gonna get the results. So if you've got a massive goal in your marathon or your half marathon, or you want to improve loads, then go all in, fully commit to the process and see what happens. And stop setting safe goals. Don't be afraid to fail because it is just part of a successful process. If you're aiming for something that seems realistic, it's probably because it's realistic in everybody else's eyes. And therefore, you're not going to find out what you're truly capable of. Third point is, don't neglect the lower distances. You're not going to be able to run a 2:48 marathon if you can't run a 5K in 20 minutes. And everybody can run a 5K in 20 minutes, and everybody can run a sub 3 hour marathon. And the fourth point is, remove all the guesswork. And the quickest way to do that is work with a professional, somebody who's been there and done it and knows how to get others there. It took me a couple of more years of figuring it out for myself to then work with somebody who really knew what they were doing and how to get people where they wanted to go, to then realizing, oh my God, there's a whole new way of doing things. And all of a sudden, everything makes sense. And every single time you step out the door, it's moving you from where you are now, specifically you as an individual, where you are now, to where you want to get to, whilst at the same time reducing the injury risk. Because if you don't get injured and you do the right things well all the time, then you're going to move forward massively. And if you're looking for professional guidance, then get in contact by booking a call in the link in the description. And if you want to know how to run a sub 3 hour marathon, click on this video here.